We'll have a guest speaker. Our guest speaker for this month is Dr. Phil Oliver. He received his Ph.D. from Vanderbilt University in 1998. His academic specialty is American philosophy, in particular, the thoughts of William James and John Dewey. His book, William James's Springs of Delight, Vanderbilt, 2001, explores personal enthusiasms and habitual delights and their power to make our days meaningful, delightful, spiritual, and even transcendent, and to sponsor our return to life in all its rich, robust, and personal concreteness. Welcome, Dr. Oliver.
Well, hello. Good to see you all. I'm going to see if I can figure out how to manage the logistics. I've got a monitor here, got you there. I'm used to roaming more than I think I'm going to do because I would trip if I tried to do that. But I'm a peripatetic, philosophically speaking. Those are the old followers of Aristotle who like to walk while they thought. But I'll try to be in one place here for a few minutes. I'm thinking maybe I should probably set my clock to give me a 2-minute warning because I wasn't sure what the time constraints would be until just the other day. So here we go. Well, just need to give it right. Okay, if I don't hear the harp, somebody please call it to my attention. Make sure I've got the right buttons here. So, happiness, a free person's worship. There we go. Alluding both to Bertrand Russell's 1903, A Free Man's Worship, a very short and really almost sacred essay, and his 1930 Conquest of Happiness, a more popular work. The former reflects Russell's early Platonic phase. Platonists are always looking for perfection, so perfect happiness, and that wasn't quite within reach for him. By 1930, he'd figured that out with the Conquest of Happiness. But both of those works by Russell are concerned with how to achieve godless happiness in a finite and indifferent cosmos. There's where you can find me if you have any objections to anything I say. I would love to hear any feedback anyone has. There's the email. I'm from MTSU. I think the program has me at Vanderbilt. I did get the Ph.D. there, but I got out of there, and now I commute down to Murfreesboro to teach my classes. This is my first visit with you. Happy to be here. Thanks to Pat Sharp's very kind invitation back when we met in April after one of our Lyceum events in Murfreesboro at MTSU. And I can say, though, that you do come highly recommended, at least an earlier iteration of you comes highly recommended. A student of mine in my atheism and philosophy course visited Sunday Assembly in 2014, came back and said, people were incredibly friendly and very welcoming, so happy again to be with you. The website events page slightly miscredentials me as a psychologist and a super ace. I've never been called that before. But I'm just a philosopher and of non-superhero stature, but happy to be here under any description. As for what happiness researchers have found lately, which I am billed as coming to tell you, well, that's not exactly my beat, but I can report a few things. I've found a few things in recent research, and a lot of this is familiar to most of us. Money does not lead to nearly as much happiness as people think that it will. Right? And that's why Russell said success can only be one ingredient in happiness. It's too dearly purchased if all the other ingredients have been sacrificed to obtain it. So we're not just going single-mindedly for happiness, we're going for, well, what the Greeks called eudaimonia, the good life, flourishing, well-being, all of that. And that's also why William James wrote once to H.G. Wells, the moral flabbiness born of the exclusive worship of the bitch goddess, success, that with the squalid cash interpretation put on the word success, is our national disease. This was back in the early 1900s. And that really does deserve applause. I don't get applause from students in class to that line as often as I should. Right? Because, you know, they're majoring in concrete management and stuff. Buying experiences, not possessions, leads to greater happiness. I think a lot of people know that. Experiences tend to satisfy higher order needs, specifically the need for social connectedness and vitality, a feeling of being alive. Kindness counts. They studied elementary school students. I think it counts from the very beginning. And Kurt Vonnegut said it best. I don't think that they shared this quote with the elementary students, but he said in Goodbye, Mr. Rosewater, "Hello, babies, welcome to Earth. It's hot in the summer and cold in the winter. It's round and wet and crowded on the outside. You've got 100 years here. There's only one rule that I know of. God damn it, you've got to be kind." People who exercise on work days are happier, which is, as I said, I'm a peripatetic. I try to walk before I teach. More likely to say something true. Also, in summarizing a few other findings, be grateful, hug when welcomed. Smile and volunteer. It boosts your oxytocin levels. Hang out with other happy people. And spend on others, not just yourself. A good reminder in this holiday season. And that's enough psychology, positive psychology for me for now. I'm going to go to philosophy now, which maybe isn't that different. Wrote this book, William James's Springs of Delight, which is really a book about happiness, although there are other things to be said about it, but that's what it's really about. That's why I wrote it. They who know the truth, this isn't from James, this is from Confucius. They who know the truth are not equal to those who love it, and they who love it are not equal to those who delight in it. And so, Springs of Delight, James used that phrase to refer to the sources of personal happiness and how we can keep them on tap. But he also said the worm at the core of our usual springs of delight can turn us into melancholy metaphysicians. But, and boy, after that, after the soundtrack that I've been hearing and the music so far, this is really true. The music can commence again and again at intervals, and that's important. James asked, how can things so insecure as the successful experiences of this world afford a stable anchorage? A chain is no stronger than its weakest link, and life is, after all, a chain, like the double helix. And he said the really vital question for us all is, what is this world going to be? What is life eventually to make of itself? The center of gravity of philosophy must alter its place, the earth of things, or maybe the emphasis should be the earth of things, long thrown into shadow by the glories of the upper ether, must resume its rights. In other words, bring happiness down to earth. And the best thing that I think James ever wrote was in a letter to a friend before he became the famous philosopher, psychologist, thinker. He said to his friend who was despondent, he said, remember when old December's darkness is everywhere about you, that the world is really full, in every minutest point, as full of life as in the most joyous morning you ever lived through. The sun is wanging down and the waves are dancing and the gulls are skimming down at the mouth of the Amazon. James said, if you just remember that, you can often lift yourself out of your evil moods. So I'm going to skip through some of my course blog sites. I have my students blog with me in all of our courses, and so this is just to give you a little more introduction to my background, what I'm doing. I teach a course in atheism, but also a course in happiness. I call Intro to Philosophy co-philosophy because I want students to think of themselves as collaborators, and I think we all need to think of ourselves as collaborators when trying to decide what it means to live the good life. I do environmental ethics, bioethics, sometimes ethics. I have a couple of blogs, and by way of introduction, really, to our theme, which can sometimes be somber to some people, I think we need to keep it light with people like Calvin and Hobbes. And this is an important reminder, a serious point. Calvin is waiting for life to shower him with meaning and happiness, and of course, we know that doesn't work. You can't wait around for it. It is a construction. And one of the quotes I saw up here earlier said that happiness is something we must build. We can't wait for it to drop down on us, and that's certainly true. And the other important reminder, of course, is that we are operating on a deadline, all of us. And so there is some urgency to figuring out how to live well. We don't know when the reaper will show up at our door, but it's good to know that there does come a time when you have to be done. I'm a Western-oriented philosopher. I study Western philosophy mostly in the American philosophical tradition, but I think it's always important to nod to the other traditions and certainly to the Eastern traditions, which Buddhism in particular is all about the quest for happiness. And I love this little cartoon that indicates that here's your stereotypical overstressed Westerner. I want happiness, right? He says, well, you got to get the eye out. That's the first thing, and that's ego. Ego is the source of attachment and desire. You get that out, and what you're left with is the thing you were looking for all along: happiness. Julian Baggini, I don't know if you've heard of him. He wrote one of the little texts that we use in that atheism course called Atheism, A Very Short Introduction, a wonderful little book. And he recently spoke to an Anglican church in England, and he said, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. And he was making fun of that phrase. And it's an easily parodied phrase. But he says he told the congregants that what he thinks that usually means is that they reject creeds, they reject institutions, they think that religions are too obviously human to claim any divine authorship. And all of that's probably something that would resonate with this group, I'm guessing. Baggini goes on to say, though, that he thinks that there should be more inclusion of religious and people who call themselves spiritual. That really it's something we shouldn't get hung up on the terminology about. He says, we shouldn't get hung up on the nomenclature. Living life, the important thing is that living life in a religious spirit, whatever you believe about the spiritual or the supernatural, is something that we can all do. We all have the capacity to live in what he's calling a religious spirit, where he's reclaiming the term religion for everybody. He says there should be room for atheists in the community of the religious and vice versa. I think you Sunday Assembly folks seem a bit further down that secular road than some of the Anglicans, although they're pretty far down the road too. Judging by your stated affirmation that I read on your website, that you're born from nothing and go to nothing, enjoy the interim. You worship no deity, having found something bigger than Phil. I couldn't resist throwing that line in. Bigger than Phil, namely nature and the humanity that nature has spawned. You may know Mel Brooks's 2,000-year-old man, who asked to explain the origin of God, admits that early humans first admired a guy in our village named Phil. But then one day a thunderstorm and a lightning bolt hit Phil, and they said, there's something bigger than Phil. Well, of course there is. We already knew that. I'm going to skip this cartoon. But if you don't know this strip, this cartoon strip called Jesus and Mo, this is one of the strips that they use to parody the concept of spiritual, not religious. I should say, I'm skipping through. I made way too many slides. I always do for presentations. I'm skipping through most of them. But if you want to find any of them and ponder them at your leisure, I have posted them on that one of my blog sites. It's called delightSprings.blogspot.com. So, and if you didn't get that, ask me later, and I'll tell you. And you can go through the slideshow at your convenience. That one didn't work, so we're going to skip that one altogether. Right. But the point that it's making is, there it is now, it's working. Spirit, what does spirit mean? Etymologically, it really just means breath. And spirituality should come from the living breath of being alive and knowing that you are. And as Mr. Rogers used to say, it's a great feeling to know that you're alive. Carl Sagan is another of my heroes who has thoughts about this, and a different thought from what Baggini said, which is that to be an atheist is not that it makes us feel better or makes us happy, and I beg to differ. My view is that many atheists, or secularists, if we prefer to avoid that A word, find themselves much happier when they look at life and death face to face and don't blink. They find that they are happier. Life is more rewarding. Carl Sagan said a similar thing. You probably know this quote, so you can come back and find it if you don't. But he also said, somewhere something incredible is waiting to be known. It sure is. Another book that we used in that course, the Little Book of Atheist Spirituality by a French author. You can go back and look at that later if you want to. William James is my biggest hero in philosophy, and my book is about him. If we were to ask the question, what is human life's chief concern, one of the answers we should receive would be, it's happiness, how to gain, how to keep, how to recover happiness is, in fact, for most of us at all times, the secret motive of all we do. Maybe that overstates it a bit, but it's a really important thing. It's not to be understated. Bertrand Russell, who gave me my inspiration for this talk, was a critic of William James and said that James talked about the will to believe and we really need the will to doubt, and they both have a point. There was a very interesting piece in the New Yorker recently by James Wood that some of you may have seen, where he talked about his childhood and said that in his adolescence there was plenty of happiness in his household, but it was rarely religious happiness. The self was viewed with suspicion. His mother and he quarreled over the corpse of his religious faith. He said, as a young man, I lined up my pagan, life-loving heroes, Nietzsche, Camus, D.H. Lawrence, Keith Moon, Ian Dury, in glorious defensive formation, reasons to be cheerful. And so here's what some of them said. Nietzsche, you may know, said, the formula for our happiness, a yes, a no, a straight line, a goal. Gotta be goal-driven, he said. Albert Camus, you will never be happy if you continue to search for what happiness consists of. I don't think that's necessarily true, but it's a very French perspective. D.H. Lawrence, it's a fine thing to establish one's own religion in one's own heart. Right? So do your own thing. And Keith Moon said, I tried several things, and this was the only one that I enjoyed doing. So all of those are important perspectives on how to be happy and how to personalize the quest for happiness. Ian Dury, I don't know much about him, but he said, all I want for my birthday is another birthday. I understand. Right? So my message today really is, secular folk have plenty of reasons to be cheerful, plenty of historical allies, and plenty of proven strategies for living good, honorable, meaningful, constructive, happy lives. Believe me, or believe Lord Russell, who said, and I'm not going to read the whole thing because some of it's a downer, but he said, happiness is nonetheless true happiness because it must come to an end. So be happy when you've got the opportunity. The free man's worship was originally called the free man's worship, and I think it's not insignificant that he changed the article. Right? It's more than stylistic. His trajectory was generally away from more precise Platonic exclusion to the perfect form of happiness and towards the recognition that there are many ways, as many ways to be happy as there are different ways of being human. Right. So I'm going to skip that. You may already be familiar with why I am not a Christian, and if not, it's worth a look. There we go. Bertrand Russell said in his essay, Why I'm Not a Christian, that nobody is really worried about what's going to happen to the universe millions or billions of years from now. Some of us think we worry about it sometimes, or bothered by the fact that we live in a finite cosmos. He said nobody really, really feels that way. Don't believe it. He says, of course it's a gloomy view to suppose that life will die out. At least I suppose we may say so, but there are days when you don't feel that way. It's not such as to render life miserable. Well, that's what Dr. Flicker said. If you know Annie Hall, Woody Allen's film, Annie Hall, Dr. Flicker told young Alvy, he said, the universe won't be expanding for billions of years yet, Alvy. We've got to try to enjoy ourselves while we're here. And I would endorse that point, so would Bertrand Russell, and so would all of my philosophical heroes, I think. Well, let's move it along. In Conquest of Happiness, Bertrand Russell said, my purpose is to suggest a cure for the ordinary day-to-day unhappiness from which most people in civilized countries suffer. He wrote this in 1930. It's maybe still true, which is all the more bearable because having no obvious external cause, it appears inescapable. So he had decided at this point in his philosophic maturity that he was wrong to say that we have to resign ourselves to a cold and indifferent cosmos. He said we need to get on with the task of figuring out what makes us happy. Totally within there. I have to mention this. I said I'm a peripatetic in philosophy, and so was Bertrand Russell. Every morning, Bertie would go out for an hour's walk by himself, composing and thinking, and then come back and write for the rest of the morning smoothly, easily, and without a single correction. I think that underscores that point about people who exercise on work days have a better time of it. So take a walk when you have the time. Solvitur ambulando, it is solved by walking. That's what that phrase means. And Diogenes, the ancient philosopher, the dog philosopher, solved Zeno's paradoxes by simply walking away. I think that's the way you can do it. Have you tried long walks? Okay. My daughter once wrote this quotation down. She was a big Harry Potter fan and said, happiness can be found even in the darkest of times if you just remember to turn on the light. Very important wisdom there. Bertrand Russell has an important message to future generations that was never more timely than it is right now. This is a video clip. If you've never seen it, look for it on YouTube. Basically what he says is we need to be committed to the truth and to facts and not to what we wish were so. We need to look the universe in the eye, and we need to be more tolerant and accepting of people in all their diversity. He said it very elegantly, more elegantly than I just did, but really an important message. And then he said near the end of Conquest of Happiness, the secret of happiness is this. Let your interests be as wide as possible. Let your reactions to the things and persons that interest you be as far as possible friendly rather than hostile. And the man, the person, remember it was 1930, there's my 2-minute warning. I think I can get it in under the wire. Who pursues happiness wisely will aim at the possession of a number of subsidiary interests in addition to those central ones upon which his life is built. In other words, don't be a single-minded obsessive. Try to cultivate a wide variety of interest in many things and people and experiences. And I'm going to move it on. Lots of other quotes from Russell that we would have gone into if we had 40 minutes and not 20. But he says, each of us is in the world for no very long time, and within the few years of our lives, we have to acquire whatever it is we are to know of this strange planet and its place in the universe. To ignore our opportunities for knowledge, imperfect as they are, is like going to the theater and not listening to the play. He said, to be happy in this world, especially when youth is past, it is necessary to feel oneself not merely an isolated individual whose day will soon be over, but part of the stream of life from the first germ to the remote and unknown future. He says that in the family chapter of Conquest of Happiness. And while he's talking about the stream of generations and the procreative impulse, he's not saying that you have to have children of your own to feel a part of the stream of life. Or rather, he's saying that happy people claim a lasting stake in the life of their species and care about the world that shall come after them because we're all family and they are all our children. And that's what John Dewey meant when he said we're all links in the continuous human community. Personal death does not end all, but stagnation and social hostility might. We must enlarge our hearts and transcend selfish isolation. We must evolve past envy, past the age of Drumpf. Right. There's John Dewey. The greatest joy, and I'm about to finish. To be happy is to be a citizen of the universe, enjoying freely the spectacle that it offers and the joys that it affords, untroubled by the thought of death, not really separate from those who will come after us. It is in such profound, instinctive union with the stream of life that the greatest joy is to be found. We have reached a stage in evolution which is not the final stage. We must pass through it quickly, for if we do not, most of us will perish by the way, and the others will be lost in a forest of doubt and fear. To find the right road out of this despair, civilized man must enlarge his heart as he has enlarged his mind. He must learn to transcend self, and in so doing, to acquire the freedom of the universe. Let us make it so. Amen. Questions or complaints or objections?
What was that blog again?
delightsprings.blogspot.com, and you'll find the whole slideshow there. And do please, if you got any thoughts that you want to share with me, it's phil.oliver@mtsu.edu. All right. Well, more music, please.